Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first APM On Demand webinar titled The Scramble for New and Nimble Maritime Suppliers Amid COVID-19. My name is Hairul Burhan and I'll be the moderator and MC for this session. Before we get to the session proper, I would like to share a few housekeeping rules. First, feel free to ask questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. The speakers will try to answer them towards the end of the presentation and during Q&A. If time does not permit, we will reach out to you individually after the session. Secondly, you will be redirected to a survey form after you leave this webinar. I encourage everyone to complete this survey to let us know how we did for this webinar and how we can improve for the next one. Today's topic is all about maritime suppliers and how COVID-19 has impacted the industry. We are fortunate to have 4 industry leaders today to share their insights into the topic and also to answer any questions from the audience. Let me first introduce the first speaker, Danny Lian. Danny has been in the maritime industry for more than 30 years. He is currently the president of the Singapore Association of Ship Suppliers and Ship Services, SASS. He's also the founder of Amos International Singapore Private Limited, and is a non-executive director on the SGX-listed Amos Group since February 2019. He is currently the chairman of the Business Leaders Alumni Club, and he sits on the Singapore Business Federation's SME Committee for Manpower, Talent and Skills, and also Government Procurement. Now, without further ado, please welcome Danny.
Good afternoon, Hairul, and also a very good afternoon to my fellow panelists, Mr. Nagat, Mr. Peter Schellenberger, and also Mr. Sim Teck Siang. Also, thank you very much for the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit on the Singapore ship suppliers industry. First and foremost, I think as we kick off this sharing, I'd like to give you some of the agenda of the things that I want to just briefly touch upon. First, I'd like to talk about a little bit about the Singapore and the importance of its port and why Singapore has put so much emphasis on port development. And I will quickly go through some port statistics so that I can put this all into a context. And then I'll talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on the ship suppliers here in Singapore and the future of ship suppliers, and followed by later on I can answer any questions that you may have. So Singapore, as many of you know, is known as the busiest transshipment hub in the world, and it's connected to over 600 ports and over 120 countries. Average of 1,000 ships are in port at any one time, and is also the top bunkering port, supplying average of about 45 million tons annually. It also employs 170,000 people across 5,000 maritime establishments, and it contributes 7% of the GDP of Singapore. So I will talk a little bit about, just give you a brief stats of the number of ships that called Singapore over the last 3 years. If you can look at the bar chart, average the number of ships have been averaging about 130 to 140,000 ships per annum. Don't let the numbers fool you. The numbers are declining. It's also because the tonnage, the GT, the gross tonnage of vessels have also been increasing, but numbers have been dropping slightly. On the right graph, you can see the percentage of ships that comes to Singapore to take supplies. So it's been averaging about 21% over the last 3 years, from 2017 to 2019. The next slide I have distilled the number of ships calling into 4 major categories: containers, bulk, tankers, and passenger ships. So you can see that over the last 3 years, they have averaged almost the same. They're almost around the same numbers. The passenger numbers are very high. It's not because we have a lot of cruise ships, but also that takes into account the number of the passenger ferries that ply between Singapore and the Indonesian islands, and that they have many frequencies a day. So that also counts as a passenger, but this also includes the cruise ships. The next slide, what I've done is that I've looked at the first 3 months, the first quarter of 2019 versus the first quarter of 2020. You can see that the first month on month, in terms of the number of vessels calling, the first 2 months in January and February in 2020, year on year, has gone up a little bit. But in March, year on year, it has dropped. Distilling it further, you can see the container, the bulk, the tanker, the passengers. Generally, they are pretty stable in January, in February as well. If you can, the next slide will show you a little bit about February, right? So February is also relatively constant. I think the big numbers you can see that drop is in March, where you can look at the passenger vessels have dropped year on year, right? From 4,000 March in 2019 to 1,945, about 52% drop. The rest of the numbers, they are almost there. The other one is that you can see tankers have also gone up a fair number as well. Okay. So if you look at the number of ships that have been taking supplies versus the number of ships that calling, you can see that the 2019, they are quite constant, about the 20%, 21% number. But in the first quarter of this year, the numbers have gone up slightly, especially in March. You can see that it's almost 28% of the number of vessels calling Singapore are taking supplies. So this we probably attribute it to many of the ports in North Asia have been closed for this pandemic, and Singapore can be seen as a safe port for ships to come to take supplies and to do the necessary work here around this area. Okay. So then that takes us to the main topic. What's the impact of the industry? So I have identified 3 main areas that really have impacted the ship supplies industry. First one is, of course, cash flow. The other one is labor and supply chain, right? And I will talk a little bit about the 3. First one is cash flow. So a lot of our members have complained that cash flow has been tight because of the situation, and many of their customers have told them that they have been unable to make prompt payments because of the COVID-19. You know, a lot of them are supposedly working from home, and they don't have access to documents, they don't have access to materials so that they can make the payment as quickly as they want. So this has also created some cash flow issues. And the other part why cash flow is tight is also because suppliers in Singapore, then because of this situation, they are also anxious. So they want to get paid quicker. They want to be paid more promptly. They've shortened their payment terms. So, you know, so it's an inflow and outflow situation. You know, you get paid slower, but you have to pay quicker. So cash flow becomes an issue. And also on top of that, because of the circuit breaker measures that have been taken, a lot of extra measures have been taken, and these are also a cash drain on the companies. And there are also many companies who are deemed non-essential. In fact, the association had at least 20 or 30 member companies who were not allowed to operate, and the association had to step in and help write into the relevant authorities to help them to get the permission to operate. But those companies who still were not allowed to operate still had to pay the fixed cost and with no revenue. So these are some of the issues that cash flow that has affected the cash flow of the ship suppliers here in Singapore. The next one we talk about is labor. Unfortunately, the ship supplies industry is relatively labor intensive. And we do employ a significant number of migrant workers. and because of this circuit breaker period, and also the lockdowns with neighboring countries, we do have a lot of issues with headcount. And those people those employees who had gone across the causeway, and if they didn't make it back in time, they were not allowed back into Singapore to work. So all these things had created a labor crunch for the industry, plus the fact that also some of the companies were also even though allowed to operate, they were ordered to cut down their headcount. So these were all the issues that created logistical issues that were created for ship suppliers here in Singapore. Supply chain, of course, we know that Singapore, we do import a lot of products that we sell on to the ship owners. And the first 2-3 months the world's biggest factory is in China, and a lot of factories were shut down. And because of the shutdown, and also because of the closure of ports and closure of borders, supply chain were effectively affected. And because of this supply and demand, there was demand but very little supply, so inflation happened. Especially also, in terms of the food and beverage side, the fresh vegetables and provisions, where we do a lot of import, because Singapore don't grow all these fruits and vegetables that we supply to ships. When the borders were closed, we also were affected by these border closures in terms of the supply chain. And also a lot of ships they canceled their sailings to ports. And on the contrary, freight rates also were higher. The airlines, if you had to fly something in, the air freights were also higher. So all these contributed to higher supply chain costs, right? Okay, so the challenges of the industry, the ship supplies industry in Singapore is highly fragmented, right? There are a lot, we really didn't have the opportunity to count how many ship suppliers, but estimates there are at least 200 or 300 ship suppliers, in various sizes here in Singapore. And apart from the few major big ones, the global players, and most of them are lacking economies of scale, because they are smaller scale business. Some are even called micro SMEs, and they are extremely labor intensive. So a lot of them are slow adopters to digitalization or technology. And also another reason is also because of the data that is being transacted between ship owners and ship suppliers, and also various ship owners and ship suppliers. We don't have consistent data, and this doesn't allow a lot of free flow transmission of information. And one product can have numerous descriptions, and this causes a lot of confusion. So that's why there's a need to make this data consistent, so that data transmission can be more effective, and then more digitalization can take place. One last thing that we realize is that there is actually no enforcement of a certain quality or certain standard of delivery, or certain standard of product or service within the industry. And this is created a lot of gray areas in terms of supplies for the industry. So way forward from here, I do think that it's important that the industry look at some form of consolidation, so that it can leverage on the economies of scale. I think it's also important for the industry to adopt some form of technology, so to reduce the dependence on labor. And when you use labor, you can use it at the high payoff areas. You can train them for the higher end jobs, rather than just picking and packing. And also using technology to increase efficiency and productivity. And I think this can be done to take over the laborious, the jobs that are very repetitive, very manual. If you can employ some form of technology or robotics to replace this, I think that would be great. And also standardization of data, which I spoke about earlier on. And my fellow panelists, Peter and Teck Xiang, and together with the association and also a think tank called eGenie, we are actually working with government agency called A-Star now to look at how we can standardize data so that this can be applied across the industry to make digitalization easier in terms of adopting the technology. And this is something that we want to do a compliance, and also to try to get some form of standards with regards to compliance within the industry. So, when we talk about the adopting of technology, the Singapore government, MTI, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, in 2018, they launched the National Industry Transformation Roadmap, and sea transport is one of the roadmap that is being promoted, and the government would like to use this ITM, or the Industry Transformation Map, to value add the sector by $4.5 billion and to create over 5,000 jobs by 2025. And the sea transport roadmap is being helmed by the MPA, Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. And they have also this Maritime Transformation Program, which has got 5 main innovation trusts, which this one we can talk about it on a separate occasion. And the industry and the A-Star and together with government agencies have come up with a 4D playbook, which it says, discover your business, and then you look at how you can collect data and how you can use data, and then how you can use dashboards to help in transforming your business. In short, I look at it as an acronym for transformation, ART, which can say, you analyze your situation, your business situation. Then you rethink, R for rethink and redevelop your strategy, and then T to transform your business in terms of what is the most needed in terms of taking your future-proofing your business, right? So some ideas and some things that some of the ship suppliers here in Singapore have done, as taking the step as a technology-driven ship suppliers. Earlier this year, the first quarter of this year, drones have been used to make deliveries to ships already. So this local startup called F Drones, they already have made 2 deliveries to ships out at Anchorage. So it's the BVLOS drone. That means it's a beyond visual line of sight. So they're actually sitting in a room, and then using the computer, the screens to fly the drones onto the ship. So is this really the future of delivery, and will this take on? And actually, when we talk to F Drones guys, they are actually developing a higher capacity, a higher payload drone to take heavier deliveries to ships. And so this might be the future of delivery, right? Okay, so leveraging on technology, we together now with A-Star and also with government agencies, we are looking at how we can create solutions, ship supply solutions, using artificial intelligence, using machine learning, using Internet of Things, blockchain, data analytics. So these are really not something that we just talk about. These are things that we are actively looking at and exploring and working on in trying to transform the industry. So in the operating the warehouse and the delivery environment, ship suppliers is essentially quite brick and mortar. You still need to physically move stock. So actually, to replace or to better make use of manpower, can you use RPA? Can you use vertical lift modules? Can you pick with robotic arms? Can you use RFID technology? Can you use AGVs coupled with robotic arm picking? So that and everything you digitalize it so that you can leave your headcount to do the really high value work. And today, as I said, SAS is really working with Enterprise Singapore, eGenie, MPA, SimTech with regards to transforming the industry with technology and and making Singapore the most advanced port in the world in terms of harnessing technology to be more productive and more effective in what we do. So some food for thought, can a ship supplier be a technology company that specializes in marine logistics and supply chain? So can we then be technologically driven so that we can also add value to what we do? So these are questions that we can think about and we can ponder and see what we can do to take it to the next level. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny, for the insightful sharing, especially on the future of ship suppliers and how to leverage on technologies such as IoT. During the presentation, I have received several questions from the audience, but for the sake of time, I will share them with you during the panel session and Q&A at the end of at the end of the session. Moving on to the next speaker, we have Megat Zariman Abdul Rahim from Bumi Armada. Okay. Megat is responsible for the running of Bumi Armada's OMS system, which includes the OSV and SC sub-segments. He has also held various other positions in Bumi Armada over the last 5 years. And prior to that, he has spent over 21 years with Schellenberger. Concurrently, he is the Vice President of the Malaysian Oil and Gas Service Council. Please welcome Megat.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Khairul, for the introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Khairul and the organizer for giving me and Bumi Armada the opportunity to share with you how we think the COVID-19 is affecting the OSV industry currently. But before I go there, maybe I'll just quickly update you about Bumi Armada. We are an international floating services company servicing the oil and gas customers around the world. We have operations not only in Asia, but also in Africa, Europe, as well as South America, and also in the Caspian region. And I am responsible primarily in the offshore supply vessel or OSV and in the subsea construction business. So therefore, I will be focusing mostly on the OSV and the subsea business for the topic that we are referring to today. What's unique about the current crisis is that because we are serving the oil and gas industry, the low oil price that we are seeing affecting the world generally is causing what I call a double whammy scenario for the OSV industry. So on one hand, we have the COVID-19 and the lockdown issues that we have to deal with. And on the other hand, we have the impact of the low oil price, which is also going to be quite substantial and going to be prolonged. Touching on the COVID-19, some of the challenges that we see today primarily related to logistics and people movement. So we have issues with trying to get our crews to be signed on and off of the vessels, with the restriction put by many maritime authority across the world. We have not been able to sign off or on our crews, which resulted in a lot of our crews having to stay longer than what's planned. So today we have more than 50% of our crews on board our vessels that's staying beyond the scheduled days on board. Even though in the cases where we could have the crew sign off, in certain countries they do relax, like in Malaysia, the Malaysian Maritime Authority has given the relaxation for us to sign on and off crews, but we still struggle with getting these people travel to their residence, especially if they are overseas, because the border is still closed, and even domestically between East Malaysia and West Malaysia, there is also no flights available. So that's just compounded the problem that we have. And the other problem that we have also is dealing with trying to get goods into our bases and across the world, trying to bring spare parts in, trying to get items delivered is also a challenge, and it's taking longer than what we had normally been able to do. Not to mention also that we are seeing a small number of positive cases on board the vessels that we have to deal with, and we are fortunate that we have the support of the local authority and the clients to help us deal with that. But still, there are issues related to quarantine of the vessel, issues related to disinfecting the vessel, and having the vessel on standby also as a result of those. Talking about vessels on standby, this impact of the COVID-19 and lockdown is not only for us, but also to our clients. So as many of our vessels are hired because of the drilling rigs operation, some of these rigs are not able to operate, hence affecting our vessels to be able to be on hire, which then cause our vessels to be on standby, and the cost of those are on the ship owners like us. At the same time, we do have inspection and audit and permit approval that's due, that needs to be extended, and those are also affected because of the lockdown. So a lot of operational challenges that we have. Now, on the low oil price, the impact is a little bit prolonged, and we are seeing, for example, now a lot of our clients are already coming back to us to ask for reduction in the rates of our charters. We are seeing projects being cancelled, and some are being delayed or deferred. Yeah? And as a result of that, we have to look into our vessels to be laid up. So these are some of the effects of the COVID-19 and the low oil price on the OSV business. So if you look at how does this affect our supply chain, our own supply chain. Now, what we like to do is to focus on long-term sustainability with our key vendors, because at the end of the day, we need each other, and we have to find a way to be able to work collaboratively. We need to be very transparent in trying to find creative solutions that we can reduce the cost of operation, but at the same time, we have to be able to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the cash flow management. As we are being pressured for discount by our clients, and also requests for revised payment terms, we need to be working with our vendors on the same principle also. Yeah? And what I would like to do is to focus mainly on cost efficiency. And if we look at what are the things that are requiring a lot of this supply chain management, first is in the dry docking. We do have dry docking that's being planned that we need to do, and we need to work effectively with our vendors and our suppliers. How do we do that in the most optimal way? We do have to lay up some of our vessel, and again, we need to work with our suppliers. How can we do this better? And also the crew change in terms of logistics and planning, and finally on the spares and inventory management. So we need to work with our suppliers to find how best we manage the delivery of the spares for our vessels. Now, there's a lot of talk about digitalization. I am a big proponent of digitalization. There are ways that we can use digitalization to improve our efficiency. For example, we have implemented ECDIS, which is the electronic chart instead of paper chart on our vessels. That has also helped reduce the cost. We are using BusNet for our maintenance system on the vessels. And one thing that we are looking at is also on the CBM, as to help us being able to do more, to do better in terms of our maintenance program. But the challenges that we see when it comes to digitalization is the heavy initial cost that we have to invest in the software and hardware, as well as infrastructure costs. So today, the cost of bandwidth is still very high. So for us to implement any digitalization efforts, we need to really find a good balance between the investment and the return of those investment in this soonest possible way. But there are success stories. We have been able to work effectively with some of our vendors to achieve that. And when we can see clearly the benefit, we have absolutely no problem in moving forward in implementing it. So that's pretty much what I wanted to touch on with regards to the supply chain. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the later stage.
Thank you, Magad, for your sharing, especially on how this pandemic has also affected the OSV market. We will now proceed to the panel and Q&A session. Joining Magad and Danny will be two other experienced industry professionals. First, we have Peter from Thome Ship Management. Peter has spent 30 years in various executive positions, and currently he is the VP of Group Global Supply Chain with Thome Ship Management. Previously, he was in OSM, where he set up OSERV as Managing Director to create a digital e-procurement platform for fleet and third-party clients. Prior to that, he was with V Group to head supply chain and Marcas Asia. Next, joining him, our fourth panelist is Mr. Sim Teck Siang. He heads the procurement at Birch Bulk, one of the world's leading independent dry bulk owner, and he's also the honorary council member for the Singapore Association of Ship Suppliers and Services. Now, welcome everyone. Let me check everyone is on the screen. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time off your busy schedule to be here with us. The topic we are discussing today is finding new suppliers, especially during this very uncertain climate. Now, we have heard Danny show some very interesting stats on how COVID-19 has affected ship suppliers in Singapore, while Magad has shared how the OSV business has been impacted by a double whammy of both the COVID-19 virus and low oil prices. How about the ship owners themselves? Peter and Teck Siang, how has business been over the last few months, and how are your companies adapting to the current situation? The supply of products and services affected during COVID-19?
Yeah, if I may, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I think it's no secret that the shipping industry generally has slowed down over the months. And of course, the income has been affected. But thankfully, we have some long-term charters that actually makes it more important for us to protect those contracts to make sure that we run a good ship and our operation is optimized. On the supply side of things, it has been challenging as well, because I think a lot has been covered in the slides Danny and also Magad has shared the challenges in regards to supply, and I see the exact same unfolding over the last couple of months. Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, of course, we have a slightly different situation as a ship manager. A ship owner is particularly a very reputed one like Burger Bulk. Of course, they do not have to mitigate between the interests and the owners and the suppliers as much as we do. We are really a little bit of a manager of the situations, and more than ever before, it is really not at the moment about choosing new supply partners, really. I think we were all on survival mode, trying to beat the challenges that we had. And we were forced into a situation that we're not very comfortable with, and that's simply described as planning. Our organizations and the vessels themselves are not very good at that, I have to say. And the few elements of planning, of course, are how do you do quarterly things? How do you create bulk orders? How do you consolidate things? These are all things that were now even more important to facilitate, simply because there were only a few places in the world remaining where you could safely exercise supply options. So you had to focus on really trying to get things done in that place where you could at least have a safe supply. So for the first time also, price was not the primary focus. So rather than looking for new partners, we have to say that we have had a fantastic set of suppliers, and these were people where we had an existing relationship. And what has paid off very much so is that we had a face and a mobile phone, and we could really on the ground coordinate timings and very difficult clearance matters. As you are aware, a lot of the contractual pricings that we were so proud of having in place completely were thrown overboard simply because if you look at air freight rates and so on, it is all spot based. You know, it was much more important to make sure towards our fleet sales that we keep the vessels running, because still until today, of course, a vessel that can't go is much more expensive than an additional freight component. So we have to say that our suppliers have reacted in a very amazing way. And that will further cement the relationship and will also probably lead us away from choosing suppliers in the first place, because we do have a memory. We do remember when people help us in need. We do know who went the extra mile, and that will be considered, because at the end of the day, the more we go digital and try to be smart like the rest of the world, and shipping is still far behind, and we try to replace standard transactions and processing to the benefit of both supply world and the client world, you know, with clever tools and platforms. At the same time, we know that we have moving targets. One of our big challenges is last mile delivery. So that means the partners that we have on the ground really need to know their way. They have to have their boots on the ground. They are essential services also in this time. And I would say that coming back to the industry of ship chandlery, that is really also their future mode of survival. They have to realize the fact that in that last mile component, ship chandlers also tomorrow will probably be the most competent and the most well-equipped supply partners to bring products to the vessels compared to simply freight forwarders and agents in that cascading sequence, because not only are they more competent with handing over, but also they're cheaper, simply because they can combine with their own deliveries. And what they need to realize is that they can't fence themselves off. They should make the logistics and the last mile part integral part of their business model, because otherwise they will be replaced by access to the Amazonization of the supply chain. We as buyers, we want to go as directly as possible to the source. However, we still have to get that stuff onto the ship.
Thank you for sharing, Peter. Upon registering for this webinar, we gave the audience the opportunity to ask a question to any of the speakers. We have received quite a number of them, and I'm going to pick a couple for the speakers to answer on screen. All right, the first question, perhaps Danny, this question suits, you can answer this question. What risks do service providers have to be cautious about during this unique situation of COVID-19?
I think, of course, as a ship supplier, we do face numerous risks. With all due respect to my fellow panelists, Peter and Teck Xiang, who works for ship owning and ship management companies, the biggest risk for us is actually our customers, right? The first slide, when I went through my presentation, I spoke about cash flow, and all it takes is one major customer of the ship owner to go under, and then that's where the ship supplier would then face a lot of challenges, because the margins are thin. You still have to pay your supplier, you still have to pay all your contractors, but you're not getting paid by the ship owner. I think the recent unfortunate case of Hin Leong or Ocean Tankers is one typical example of many contractors, not only ship suppliers, that would have come off short in this deal. So I think in terms of a ship supplier, we place a lot of emphasis in the customers that we deal with. So we do look at references. We do look at get information from credit rating agencies, so that we can protect ourselves as much as possible. But of course, nothing is 100%. But I think you need to do your due diligence in terms of getting hit by bad debts.
Okay, thank you for your insights. Teck Siang, do you agree with his opinion, with Danny's opinion?
Yes, very much, because I guess even before the COVID-19, the industry is pretty much challenged. It is a very competitive industry, and everyone is in the same boat, if I can use this term, because a ship operator cannot exist without suppliers. As much as we drive for digitalization, it is still a physical movement of supplies that needs to get on board the ship. So, and in order for suppliers to continue to operate, and in order for suppliers to continue to advance their processes, cash flow naturally is a very important element. And cash flow first, and subsequently being able to sustain and to develop inwards.
Okay, you are based in Malaysia. I mean, we have a couple of opinions, but mainly from Singapore. Are things the same over there in Malaysia?
Well, in Malaysia, from the business perspective, it's also not doing quite well because of the low oil price primarily. The only assurance we have so far is that Petronas, being the national oil company and being the one that manages all of the projects in Malaysia, have assured the industry that they will not cut the domestic capex, at least not significantly, but they will look at OPEX reduction. Their capex cut are mainly international. So for this year, I don't think the effect is going to be that bad compared to outside of Malaysia, where you start seeing clients cutting down 30% of their capex in the E&P world, which resulted in drilling rigs got cancelled and projects got cancelled. But in Malaysia, we are seeing only deferment of the project just because the rig is not ready, just because of the lockdown. But as soon as that's over, we should see the activities being maintained. However, like I said just now, there are pricing pressures, and I suspect that next year, in 2021, we will see a little bit more dramatic consequence of the current crisis.
Thank you for your sharing. I have a question that came in from the audience, specifically for Megat. How long will the OSV market take to rebound to normal after this pandemic?
Oh, well, that is really a question that's very difficult to answer. When we first had the 2015 crash, we thought that, well, it's going to be a short while and that we'll be able to recover. And we never recovered until some hope in 2019. So even then, when 2019 starting to recover and we started to see activities picking up, the pricing level was still nowhere near what it used to be. So a lot of the OSV industry are still working in the depressed rates, but they just have work now. Now we're seeing this crisis, and the clients are again expecting us to cut down on our rates, which is just not possible anymore. Now, what does that mean to the OSV industry in Malaysia? We don't know. I don't think a lot of us will be able to, carry through if this continues, and we'll just have to see how the industry is going to deal with it.
Thank you for your opinion. There are some questions, several in fact, on how to be a preferred supplier and what ship owners or ship agencies, ship management companies are looking for at this point of time. Before we get the panel to answer them, I would like to throw this question back to the audience. I have prepared a short poll on what characteristics are ship owners looking for in suppliers during this period. For those audience, you will have seen a pop-up poll on your screen right now. Please take maybe about 5 to 10 seconds to answer this question. And then we will bounce the answers and let the panel actually talk about the answers, whether it differs from what the expectations are. Right, the answers are coming in. Let's give them maybe about 10 more seconds. Okay, some of the options are nimbleness, transparency, large monetary reserves, digital readiness, favorable contractual terms, and reputation. We have more than 100 people replying to the poll. Let me just end the poll and share the results right now. Okay. Of all the criterias, I think the major one that in fact, I think what 32% of those that responded say that the characteristics that ship owners are likely to look for in suppliers are favorable contractual terms, followed by being digital readiness, nimbleness, transparency. I mean, they don't really care about large monetary reserve and also reputation. Now, Peter, what is your take on the results? Do you agree with the results, or is it
Absolutely. The first thing is that as a supply chain organization, we continuously try to reduce the total number of suppliers, not only because we want to have less counterparts to deal with, also that we try to consolidate whatever we can, because we also want to be fair to those preferred suppliers and really keep what we promise. And if we go for a tender, for example, we have a certain volume of X number of ships. So not only do we have to make all those inquiries visible to them, but we must also give them a fair preferred chance. Otherwise, we cannot expect the cooperation on best prices, but also the key account practices that we are requiring, and also the nimbleness. That means going the extra mile in difficult times. Yeah, so we have to basically also put our money where our mouth is, in the true sense of the word. We are coming into the needy situation of a real partnership. So it's not them and us anymore. It's really, as Tex Young said, we're in one boat. And if we do not create a certain transparency, also when it comes to financial matters that are sometimes not pleasant, these are things that will not easily be digitalized, because sometimes we have to do things on the phone and help each other and simply make things move in the best possible way. And I think this is how we grow a partnership that goes well together. At the same time and parallelly, we have to prepare for the exchanges of data, goods, and money for the future. And it is absolutely necessary for all sides to bring down the operational cost and the efficiencies of our organization. Yeah, so, and this is not only that we are looking at how many vessels can one purchaser handle. It must be supported by a smart and clever system, by the correct contracts, and we have to create benefits for our owners and our vessels, that we have a good OPEX cost, and we are ready to shoot when it comes to business development. So we have to be on top of everything and really concentrate on working with best-in-class suppliers, which is the best chance for those people that understand it's not about size, it's about the service definition and how well do they understand what we really need, and do not waste our time.
Tex Young, how about you? Do you agree with the results of the poll?
I think in relation to contractor, I think it's quite broad based actually. But it does set a baseline, because in terms like this, we could see how suppliers react to contract, right? The contract that is signed pre-crisis sets a baseline of what we require. And we could see certain suppliers, they may struggle to keep up with contractor. This may be due to many reasons. It could be force majeure, I think this crisis actually really puts the focus on supply evaluation. It actually sets a good platform as a buyer to evaluate thoroughly our suppliers. But it is quite pleasant for us at Baggybout to witness that we have got good suppliers that actually rises above and beyond the benchmark we have established. They really come forward. They came with transparency, what they have, what they can do, very clearly understanding our models of operation. Do not beat around the bush. Come to the point, tell us what you have, what you don't have. If you require something, you don't have it now, but when can you deliver it? They are transparent, and this is the way we appreciate. And this is the way I think will set a future stronger partnership.
Thank you. We are running out of time, but I believe I can take one or two more questions. Danny, you mentioned just now that going digital is one of the solutions. Have you seen that happening a lot with Singapore suppliers? And can we, especially right now, and can we attribute this to COVID-19?
I think the Singapore suppliers are slow adopters to technology, and I would say that vast majority have not adopted the full suite of digitalization. Of course, I wouldn't say that none of them have embarked. They have embarked in small portions. But I think to be really effective, then you need to then have a bigger chunk of technology available within your operating system, so that you can then see the benefits of digitization. It has already happened, but I would say that after COVID-19, I think many other ship suppliers would then see the value of being digitalized, because then you can really operate more effectively remotely, right? When you cannot operate with so many headcount, then when people can operate remotely work from home or work from a remote area, you can then continue to operate. And those who don't have this capability, then it becomes a big challenge. So I would say that although some suppliers in Singapore have seen the need to digitalize, but I think the rate of digitalization is still very slow. And I'm hoping that with this COVID-19 experience, that many more will see the need. And as an association, I'm fortunate to have Teck Siang and Peter as honorary members of SAS as well. They are aware that SAS, we are always a big promoter of transformation of the industry, and we continue to work very hard to try to transform the industry. And we believe that with this experience, more transformation will take place from here on.
Can I throw in something? Because the digitalization, and that is something what we have realized, and that is why the three of us are spending a lot of time in this industry initiative, eGenie. Digitalization without standardization is futile. So that would mean if we want to maximize the impact of standardization, that means clearly define what is for example, let's take stores. What is the minimum maritime standard that is acceptable to most? Describe it well with pictures, with technical specifications that go over and beyond what we know from IMPA. Only then we can streamline on a global basis what we want our vessels to have. It will enable our vessels to make smart choices, consolidate choices, and also as our vessels receive those items, be it spares, provisions, or stores, that they're able to identify whether our supply partner has actually delivered the right thing. So this is a disconnect that we have now, and with such a standardization effort, that is probably the first true attempt to achieve this. We are quite hopeful with the traction that we have that we are getting a few steps ahead.
Thank you for your opinion. We do have a lot of questions from the audience, and we can carry on for the next 1 or 2 hours. But however, we are short of time. We actually, in fact, are running out of time. For those whose questions were not answered, we will reach out to you separately with the answers. Once again, thank you, Danny, Bhagat, Peter, and Teck Siang for joining us and sharing your input into the topic.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, okay. Before we end, I would like to remind everyone again that you will be redirected to a survey after you leave this webinar. Please complete it to let us know how we perform and how we can improve for our next webinar. Once again, everybody, and take care and see you around. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.